I don't know about you, but I could just listen to them for the rest of the morning. So why don't you go back up there and it's always a pleasure for me to have the opportunity to share with you in this space. Some of you have probably been here long enough to remember that there were months, maybe longer, when the synagogue I began met here. So this has always been a very special place for me, and it's great to see you here. Sometimes people ask me, like, how was it I became a rabbi? I have no intention of answering that question. However, I would like to share with you my first theological exploration. It was very specific and very clear, and I wondered whether in all languages God spelled backwards was dog. And I wondered if that were so, what the implications would be. Sadly, English was the only language I could find that spelled dog backwards and called it God. But that was the beginning of my theological explorations. This business about oneness. Like, how did we decide there was one? And to tell you the truth, one is not an easy thing to have. Like in the Abrahamic traditions, we each have one. I remember a store I used to frequent that was owned by a very conservative Christian family, and at the time, I was wearing a kippah all the time. I only wore this when I led worship or taught, but right after 9/11, when I started working with Jamal Rahman, I put it on all the time because I wanted people to know that a Jew and a Muslim were walking and working together. Was interesting. I wore it for 9 years. When I took it off, the breeze on the back of my head was startlingly more intense. And I thought of another reason why Jews must wear a kippah. Kippah is a modern word for what used to be called a yarmulke. The reason, incidentally, we wear this is that it comes from a culture that believed that in the presence of royalty, one covered one's head. Like in our culture, we do the opposite. But if you believe that in the presence of royalty you cover your head, and you believe that God is the King of Kings, you know, that metaphor, then you cover your head all the time. Obviously, I'm not in the presence of God all the time anymore, because I just cover it when I'm working. The problem with all things like this is that they work until you get so automatic and then you forget it's there. And it's probably like that with all ritual, that we need somehow to wake up. I think it's like that with all relationships. You know, we need to wake up. We need to get present again and again and again. But at any rate, so those years, interesting enough, if anybody was here during the first service, I started this story and I never finished it. Yeah. That won't be the first time I'll do that. So at any rate, it took this family in the shop, it took them some while to get kind of used to me. You know, they kind of were suspicious of this guy walking in with this kind of hat on his head. But finally, one day I came in, and as I was leaving, the owner put his arm around me and said, "You and I have the same God." Whoa, that's nice. But he said, "That Allah guy is something else." And I thought, boy, you know, this notion of oneness this is really interesting. It's like all the names that we sing, you know, it's like, what is God's real name? Does God only have one? And how did we get the notion of one anyways? The story is told of Abraham. In Jewish tradition, we have the Hebrew Bible. Like all holy scriptures, we're only in real trouble if we take it literally. Because it's a metaphorical story of a spiritual quest. And it's a story of our winnings and our losses, moments we remember and moments we forget. It's our story. So you have the story the story I'm going to tell actually doesn't appear in the Bible, although when I was growing up, I thought it did. When the Hebrew Bible was finished, it became the basis for an expanding Christianity, and it became the basis for an expanding Judaism. Christianity wound up calling it the Old Testament because they had a new one. Judaism called it the Holy Bible, the Hebrew Bible, or the Tanakh, and there was commentary, and there was a tradition called Midrash. Midrash is reading between the lines, sometimes even, God bless you, between the words. You know, and new stories emerge. So even they're telling stories about characters that are in the Bible, but the stories weren't there. So the story that I grew up with is that Abraham's father, Terach, was an idol salesman. Not an idol salesman, an idol salesman. Okay, so, well, I didn't want to disparage his character. He worked very hard, but he sold idols. So one day he wanted to go to the bank, or whatever the equivalent was, somewhere around 1800 before the Common Era, and he asked Abraham, his son, if he would stay in charge of the store while he did his errand. Abraham said yes, and as soon as his father left, Abraham took a stick and smashed every idol in the store except the big guy at the end, put the stick in the arms of that idol. A few minutes later, his father comes back. His father looks at the carnage of his store, and he says, "What happened?" And Abraham says, "Well, the idol, that big idol, smashed all the other idols." And his father said, "An idol can't do that." And Abraham said, "Aha, idols can't do that." And that was supposed to be the emergence of one-goddedness. It's terrible, this one invisible God. We crave something physical. We crave something we can look at, we can touch. It used to be that every people had their own God. And when people fought with each other, their gods were fighting with each other. And whoever won had the stronger God. Obviously, if my tribe beat your tribe, defeated your tribe, our God was stronger. It's actually pretty much the same today. It's like in the Seahawks locker room before the game yesterday. They were no doubt praying that their God was going to allow them to win. And in the Saints, the New Orleans locker room, no doubt they were praying the same thing. And what conclusion do they draw after the game? If you win, obviously our prayer worked, our God works. And if you lose, well, what are you going to do? You better pray to the Seahawks God. Yesterday I was at an interfaith event of a wonderful service organization that kind of grew out of the Hindu tradition, and they kind of refer to each other as saints. And when I got up to talk, I said, I don't know how you guys are handling it, but you got the whole city of Seattle praying against you today. And it was just a reflection of a different world where they looked at me and said, what? It's like at Mount Sinai, you know, when Moses went up and left the people and we got scared because we had just had this encounter with an invisible God and we were frightened because we didn't know what to do with invisible God, so we prayed, Aaron, look, make us a God. Make us something we can look at. Make us something we can touch. Make us something out there that we can somehow hold on to. So Aaron says, okay, give me all your gold and stuff, and he throws in the oven. What comes out? Some of you know this, come on. What comes out? You're going to have to study next time I come to talk. The golden calf comes out. Did you ever wonder why a golden calf? Like, why not a golden horse? Why a golden calf? Well, because Sin is the name of the calf god that is associated with Mount Sinai. It was the god of the mountain, which would bring some kind of security to the folks who are in fear and demonstrate how quickly we forgot the teaching that was given to us in what we now call the Ten Commandments. It's not easy. It's not easy to really awaken to the notion of oneness and understand what one means. So we want to know about name. What's God's name? What an interesting question. There's one time in the Hebrew Bible that actually God is asked God's name. And that's the scene where Moses encounters what is referred to as the burning bush. Moses is sent out by his father-in-law Jethro. He's actually studying. Jethro's a priest. He's his spiritual tutor. And he's sent out to the wilderness, like that's where it happens, in the wilderness, where things get quiet, where things are not moving so fast, where the silence is both outer and inner, and where things can open. And he looks and he sees, the text says, a bush is burning and it's not consumed. And he says, oh, wow, let me turn aside and see this sight. Well, that image doesn't quite do it for me, because bushes spontaneously combust in the wilderness. That's not terribly unusual. It had to be something bigger. What I figure is, do you remember the beginning of Bonanza? I realize that I'm getting to the age where the references I make are no longer universally shared. If I say Lorne Greene and Haas, and people still go, huh? Trust me, there was a show on television called Bonanza. And in the beginning of it, it was a picture of a map, and the map kind of took flame, and it flamed around. The image that comes to me in meditation on the burning bush episode is that the field, and in the wilderness, no matter where we look, there's boundaries. That boundary might be the sky, the boundary might be the horizon, but there's boundaries. The boundary opened up and a light intruded. The kind of light that is so intense it could consume the whole thing. It had to be something powerful like that. It can't just be a bush. I'm sorry. I apologize to the translators. At any rate, okay, Moses is, astounded. Something is happening, and something big is happening. And he hears. I don't believe in a God who speaks. I believe in people who hear. And people hear according to the level of our development, the level of our openness. Moses was open enough to hear, the place you're standing on is holy ground. Take off your sandals, take off your shoes. And Moses approaches, and Moses gets his call. And his essential call is, there's people in slavery, and your task is to go down and introduce them to freedom. I use language like that because freedom always comes from the inside. Before we can ever get free in the outer world, we got to open to that. Freedom has to do with identity. Moses asks the voice he hears the obvious question. He says, look, I'm going to go down there and I'm going to tell them, and they're going to say, who sent you? And Moses says, what's your name? Great question. Nobody ever asked. I could just see God saying, finally somebody asked. The name, immediately the name he hears is Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. Translated, I am as I am, or I am that I am. It gets mistranslated often as I will be what I will be. Biblical Hebrew is different from modern Hebrew. And the differences are deep. They're into the grammar of the language. Modern Hebrew, like English, has past, present, and future. Biblical Hebrew had completed action and incompleted action. Completed action is like what we would call the past. Incompleted action could be something that's going on now and will go on in the future. It could be something that's not yet going on but will go on, and it could be something that has been going on, is going on, and will be going on. And you got to know from the context which is which. Biblical Hebrew is much more of a right hemisphere, right brain language. It's much more fluid than the left brain languages like Greek and Latin, So the name, I am, is totally inclusive. I am, I was, I am. It's not I was. It's I was, I am, and I will be, I am. I mean, this is a little hard to get, but I am, well, do it this way. I is the only pronoun that we have that is singular. Every he demands a she. Every you demands a we, a me. Every they demands a we. All the pronouns, except the only pronoun that can be unitive is first person singular. So I am as I am. I am prior to any predication. Each one of us is a predication of that I am. We take that I am and we particularize it. I am Gabe. I am Ted. I am whatever your name is. Do you know what I mean? We take that and it is our piece of the I am, but we walk that particular piece in the world, and sometimes we forget that what we're really walking is universal. We think we're walking just the particular. So there are other names of God. Ehyeh is the first person singular of the verb to be in the imperfect tense. Those of you who are taking notes, there'll be a little quiz afterwards. The other major name of God is the name that's not to be pronounced. It's made of the Hebrew letters Yod, He, Vav, He, which are also a form of the Hebrew verb to be, also in the imperfect sense. The best translation is it is, or what is. It's being. It's language trying to express unlimited being, like good luck. So at a certain point, somewhere between the 3rd and the 1st century before the Common Era, people's consciousness evolved to the point to understand that there's a problem with a name. And that is that anything we name, we draw a circle around and say everything that fits this name is inside the circle, everything that doesn't fit this name is outside the circle. Great. What happens if you're naming something outside of which nothing is? What happens if you're trying to name being itself? Isness. It's the whole thing and more. So they decided not to say that name out loud, which was an interesting, really interesting decision. They replaced it with a whole other word, because otherwise you'd come to it in the text and it's the Bible's filled with the Yud, He, Vav, He. So what are you going to do? You're going to read a sentence and all of a sudden go, you have to say something. So you say the Hebrew word Adonai. Now Adonai is a regular word. In kind of stilted modern Hebrew, you could say Adoni to a man and it means sir, my Lord. Adonai means Lord. The terrible thing, one of the terrible things, is that when you look at a Bible translation and you see Lord, that's a translation of the replacement word, not the word that was replaced. Lord is way too small. Lord is way too small. It's being, it's eternality, it's unlimited being, the eternal one. It's like, so take white out in your Bibles and fix that. Now the interesting thing, one of the interesting things is that people wanted to figure out how do you really pronounce Yud, He, Vav, He, which misses the whole point. So Hebrew was a consonantal language. It had no vowels. Hebrew is one of the languages you had to learn to speak before you could read. It's backwards from Latinated languages. So in the 5th, 6th, 7th, and formalized in the 8th century of the Common Era, a system of vowels was invented. And if you look at a Hebrew Bible now, I'm sure all of you have one of those at home. There are little dots underneath the letters or little symbols underneath the letters, and they're vowels. They're made-up vowels to remind us how to read the words. So what they did was they took the vowels for Adonai and put them with Yud, He, Vav, He. That left one of the letters of Yud, He, Vav, He with 2 vowels, so that if anybody tried to read the Yud, He, Vav, He with those vowels, you can't do it. Until a priest, a monk, in the year 1270, I just found this out. I was so excited. read the Yud He Vav He with those vowels and didn't know that the vowels were from Adonai, and took the vowels of Adonai and read them with Yud He Vav He and got Yehovah. And that's where Jehovah comes from. Jehovah is a misreading of Yud He Vav He with the vowels for a whole other word. Then there are people who think that Yud He Vav He is Yahweh. They get that from some Greek texts, because there's nowhere in Jewish text where it talks about how to say it, because the whole point is the one that we are referencing, the one that we are part of, is bigger than any word. We can't even argue about whether that one exists, because that one is existence. It's being. Everything that bees is in it. But this year I found, one of the things about a spiritual text is that it flows through spiritual beings. And spiritual beings have unlimited levels of awareness. So the text also often has unlimited levels. And one of my disciplines is, if I look at a biblical text and all I see in it is what I saw last year, I know I'm stuck. This year, out of the blue, I look at the word Adonai. Well, those of you who don't know Hebrew just have to totally trust me on this. And I see that what it is the word ani, which means I am, with a letter daled in the middle, and the letter daled means doorway, a door. Adonai says that our I am is our doorway to that which can't be spoken. Oh my. Don't you wonder what you're blind to? Do you know what I mean? You think you know something, and how can I know what my blind spots are? And then all of a sudden something opens up that you might have looked at 1,000,000 times, and you go, wow, what will I see next? I walk around wondering, how much don't I know about what's happening right now? I am, each of our I ams is our doorway to that which is beyond name. But either God has no name or God has every name. Either God has no face or God has every face. And both are true. But if God has every name, my wife Ruth showed me last night, I wanted to know what the population of the world was, the planet. You know how many people are on the planet? You probably don't know, because there's a counter on the internet that shows you how many people are being added every minute. What a great counter. We're over 7 billion of us. Over 7 billion names of God. What if everything's a name of God? Everything. What if there's no name that's not a name of God? So look, we might as well start here. Does everybody know your name? I'll tell you, sometimes when I talk, people get so confused they forget. So if you remember your name, if you came with somebody, they could remind you. Everybody remember their name. So I'm going to ask in a moment, what's the name of God? What's God's name? And I'd like you to say your names. And I'd like you to get it that you're answering the question literally. That you're answering the question explicitly. and that you're answering the question correctly. So what's the name of God? Okay, almost. We got to hear it louder. What's the name of God? Oh, that's good. And know that behind each of those names is a boundless source of life and love. Thank you.
Didn't I tell